Humanity's search for God has led them to many places, from books, to rituals, to science, to prayer, all hoping they would eventually find God. Many more hoping they would understand what this God is. Theologians and philosophers have wondered what, if any, God existed, was the language of God. Islam would tell you that God's chosen language is Arabic. The preeminent scientist that led the Human Genome Project, Francis Collins, would say it is DNA. Nations and religions and cultures all turn their God into a god of their culture and their language, all turning their gods into a being that speaks and understands their language. And in that, I believe that most people truly misunderstand the grace of God, or even the nature of God, for it is hard to be raised in any culture and not see a God that seemingly holds the human desire for power, that seeks the title of king or leader or teacher. That is, but just a greater version of man, and a greater man than the version he created. Believing then that God has made us in its image, rather than that we have made God in our image, but not just in our image, but in our desire for what we believe power wants, to be worshipped, to be loved, to be feared. For if we were powerful, these things were the things that we clung to as power. These were the things that we labeled as strength, defined by the egoic nature of our own humanity. Never realizing that through the ego and through definition and through description, we then lost the true nature of God. For if there is a God, or a being worthy of being God, a being of such propensity and might that is capable of creating all that there is, the very nature of that being would be reflected in the universe it creates. And throughout the vastness of the universe, silence prevails. There is not a living thing for which silence is not possible. There is not a bit of nature for which silence does not occur. And silence is often the thing we fear most. Darkness and silence. In darkness, we fear what will be there that we cannot see. In silence, we fear what is there that we cannot hear. And in that, we fear God. And thus, in religions, they make God a bright light, followed by trumpets and praise. In that very act, driving us away from the truth of God. Never asking ourselves why the silence can be so overbearing, why our minds crave so much to be distracted. In the silence, there is no hiding from yourself. And when you cannot hide from yourself, you cannot hide from the nature of God. If all can be silent, then all can speak to God. But if language separates man from God, if rituals and sacrifices are necessary, if prayer and word require knowing what specific God is the right God, if one needs to know the name of God, the religion of God, the worship of God, and all of these things stand in the way of you truly speaking to God, then can you truly believe that is God? A God that creates the entirety of the universe, but speaks to one people in one language, for which the world must wait for translation. A God for whom never puts that language anywhere else in all of its creation, not within the rocks, not in space, but only upon a culture in a small area of a land, and this, the divinely inspired one to write and to share. Or would it be more likely that the very nature of the universe, the silence that surrounds all things, the darkness that all will eventually return to and all before was, is the true nature of which to experience God? The truth is that there has always been a universal experience, had by people of all different religions and of no religion whatsoever, a universal experience that didn't care about literacy or vision or voice or sound, a universal experience that didn't care about culture or nation, a universal experience that millions have experienced over the many millenniums, and that experience comes oftentimes when for even just a moment that the mind goes silent, where this individual, whether they wanted to or not, suddenly got thrust into an experience for which they realized in that instance that nothing, not a single atom in the entirety of the universe is out of place, that there is no separation from the observed and the observer, the thought and the thinker, that all that they have ever held to be true about themselves and existence just wasn't as they thought it to be, and that who they are, this identity they hold on to, has never been them in the entirety of existence. This experience of oneness, of non-duality, of awareness beyond thought, has no culture and no language. It exists in one way or another in sects of every religion. The Buddhist has Zen, the Hindus have Advaita Vedanta, the Christians have mystics, the Muslims have Sufis, and on the lists do go, all in the searching for direct experience with God. And in this, people then often came to believe this experience in relation to their culture. For Christ, a society in search of Messiah, with a patriarchal God, he realized then that he and the Father were one. In Islam, Muhammad left the cave to announce to everyone, as they looked for an understanding of God, that God is one. Hindus called it Brahman, when one experiences the true nature of God, rather than seeing the world as a series of separate parts, all moving independently. One sees it as an ocean of creation for which ripples and waves arise, but that never stops being the ocean. You realize in that moment that you are a wave in the universe that forgot you were a wave, that you are not some broken person, needing forgiveness from some patriarchal dictator, nor are you some person in need of worshiping statues and offering alms to a multitude of gods, but that you are the very structure of reality made conscious, the universe experiencing itself, the true essence of God, all of which don't need to be believed, doesn't need to be accepted by faith, but can be experienced directly by those willing to embrace the silence of their mind, to let what comes come, and in that, realizing that they are not separate from God or the universe or the infinite, whatever you wish to call it. And in that state of silence, you can realize the truth you never want to admit, that you and the world and life are perfect and complete.